for this next panel, we're going to get really to the core of the SaaSpocalypse. We talked at the beginning about durability, and here we're really going to see how some companies are doing a fantastic job of navigating that, especially with regard to vertical AI. Many of these solutions have scaled extremely quickly, and we're going to hear some insights from them about what's working, what's not working, and how to do so in such a rapidly evolving environment. And so I'd like to welcome to the stage for our next panel, specifically on vertical AI, Mitch, Max, Ian, and our moderator. Thank you. Please give a round of applause.
Let's get started. Hey everyone, I'm Nihar, and I'm a partner at Better Tomorrow Ventures. We're a fintech and vertical AI seed fund, and I'm joined here today by the founders and executives of some of New York's leading vertical AI companies. And so, before I offer it to each of you to give a quick intro on yourselves and the company, I did want to offer the audience a quick reflection on how we think about vertical AI generally. And here it goes. Vertical software companies watched how an industry worked, and they built tools around those existing workflows. And we think vertical AI is a little different. For the industries they target, they're prescribing and describing a new system of work and leveraging AI to make that possible. And so that's what I would hope for us to dig into today. And Mitch, maybe we get started with you. Quick intro on yourself and the company.
Yeah, hey everybody. I'm Mitch. I'm one of the two co-founders of Basis. We provide agents to accountants broadly, and we are based fully here in New York City. Our office is in Flatiron, and excited to be here.
Hey everyone, my name is Ian. I'm the Chief Strategy Officer at Elise AI. We are a vertical AI company focused on the housing and healthcare industries, largely automating a ton of the workflows that govern and sort of operate the day-to-day of these companies. We are based here in New York City, just shy of 500 people at our company.
Hey everyone, I'm Max, CEO and co-founder of With Coverage. We replace your traditional insurance broker with a risk management team and platform that saves you money and better protects your business, and we're based in New York and Flatiron as well.
Mitch, let's kick off with you. A couple of years ago, when you were thinking about starting the company, just a quick reflection on what the structural challenges were in the accounting industry generally. What were some of the challenges with how accounting firms are traditionally set up that made it especially ripe to lean in with AI heavily and build a company here?
So accounting is awesome to start. I think most people dramatically underappreciate accounting. I like to think of accounting as the foundations of what allows people in a market economy to make decisions, right? You need to account for what occurred so that you can make economic decisions about what you're going to do. And so in some sense, the quality of your accounting is very related to how good you can make decisions, how good those decisions are going to be. And one question to ask is, historically, why is accounting not automated? Like, what are the gaps, right? We've had the ability now, the cloud revolution has come. We've had the ability to take functions, put them in the cloud, run them over and over again. And yet, accounting is very painfully not automated. And if you actually look at the amount of information that people have to make decisions, it is not a lot. And to the extent that you'll have finance teams going and trying to backfill information and add more dimensions and all these different things because that wasn't actually accounted for when the accounting was occurring. And to us, the main reason for this is that accounting is hard. It is nuanced. It is artful. It is something that you are consistently going and making decisions about. And you just actually cannot truly automate this with traditional software, right? With a series of if-then statements and essentially get to something where you have a lot more data. So I think at the beginning, a lot about what AI allows you to do is go and start to take the portions of accounting that you could not traditionally automate with software and maybe start to actually work to automate it and get it to a place where you can have far more data in order to make far better decisions.
Was there also a sort of like a capacity or labor replacement or augmentation opportunity that you were thinking about when it came to accounting?
Yeah, accounting, I mean, if you just go and Google, you'll find lots of articles from like 2 years ago talking, and even recently, talking about the massive labor shortage in accounting. Accounting is an industry that, unfortunately, is not particularly sexy for new grads to go into these days, as maybe it would have been, say, a couple decades ago. And so there was also a massive shortage, which I think compounds the broader issue of maybe not being able to automate it to the level that you would have wanted to with cloud software.
Ian, I think from some of the conversations we've had, there's a labor dynamic at play with the markets that Elise goes after. Just curious, right now with where the company is and where AI is, how do you guys approach those labor dynamics? How does AI help?
Yeah, absolutely. So in the housing industry, I think there is a pretty interesting dynamic at play where the bulk of the cost of operating a property management company really is in the labor, it's in the people. So as we think about leveraging AI to help that industry, a lot of it is around workflow automations and often labor replacement where it makes sense to do so. So some of the statistics out there include, a leasing agent, right? I think many people, most people in this room have once upon a time or currently are living in a rental property. You work with a leasing agent. That leasing agent in the United States, the average turnover rate is 46% per year, right? Which means that in every 2 years, there's pretty much full labor replacement for that role. Why is that the case? Often it's a more junior level role. If you think about a property leasing cycle, it's about what it's selling the property is actually the price, what the amenities, the views, right? What's the proximity across the subway stations, right? So the work can actually be automated quite significantly. So that's one piece. The second piece is that if you're really good at your job and you're a leasing agent at a particular property, you're going to lease out all the units and there's nothing left for you, right? So that induces sort of turnover as well because you have to go to the next company to go sell the next property. So if you think about Elise AI's products, we are in the business of automating workflows. So a lot of the work that are currently done by humans, we can actually automate and we can actually generate a ton of ROI for our customers.
Max, you talked about replacing the broker altogether. So just to take a step back, as you were starting the company, conceptualizing the product, if you were to canvas the supply chain for commercial insurance, as an example, what are the dynamics of that supply chain that make it a must-have necessarily to replace a broker altogether? What were the opportunities that you wanted to go after?
Yeah, I think it's a great difference in the ways you can approach the opportunity right now. One is you can sell to accounting firms. You can actually give them tools to make them more efficient and sell to the legacy incumbents. And that can work in some industries. And in other industries, you just need to make the decision, do you need to replace the entire function itself and do the work and actually own the outcome? And that is a different business. You actually need to deliver the service. You're not just selling a pure software play. You actually have people delivering the service empowered by your software you're building. And so when we approach the brokerage industry, first spoke to a lot of brokers, and conceptually, there's just was multiple layers that forced us to actually realize we had to replace them instead of selling to the industry. One, the incentives in the entire industry are backwards. The more that a business spends on insurance every single year, the more that the broker makes. So literally they're incentivized to do less work and make more money. So that's the first thing. The second is the current workflows that they operate on are PDFs, spreadsheets, and emails. So when you think about selling software to someone who's operating on PDFs, spreadsheets, and emails, it's an incredibly hard thing to try and enable them to be more efficient themselves. And then lastly, you think about the talent density of do these people want to adopt a new way of work? Or how much friction is there to get them to switch to something? I would break that down by how old is the average person in the industry? Accountants are pretty old, but it could be accountants, you have low friction and you're able to actually offer your software because it's seamless and it immediately enables more value. In our industry, there was very low adoption. There was low talent density to want to use any form of software tools, and they'd kind of prefer staying as is and doing things the way that it works, partially because age, partially because there was no urgency, and that's what kind of led us to say we need to actually replace the function directly ourselves.
How does the revenue model or the business model change? Because a traditional broker would sell the policy once. Basically, they get an annuity for forever. How is it different in your case?
Well, first, it's an amazing business because it's basically recurring software revenue with very low capital expenditure. So you sell a policy every single year, you make the same amount, and it renews. And it takes a fraction of the work every single year to manage that specific business. So our model, we go in, we today focus on companies that don't have an in-house risk manager or risk management function. It's like the GC, it's the CFO, they're doing this with part of their time. They're not an insurance expert. We fill that risk management function for them with a team of experts and attorneys. They then get a platform, and we do it all for a flat fee instead of on a commission basis. So we go in and we're actually like, here's how much your broker's making, here's how much you're spending, here's all in what it would be working with us. There's transparency, it's a better experience, you're better covered. And that's by aligning incentives and offering an elevated experience, that's been, I think, it's resonated really well with the 1,000 businesses or so we work with.
Right. Just want to switch back to you, Ian. Elise started around 7 or 8 years ago, 2018, right? And I think there's somewhat of a line in the sand starting in 2022 between sort of AI as we think about it now as an enabling technology and AI before that. How has the product and the proposition of Elise evolved with the capability of LLMs? And just for a lot of the folks here who are building vertical SaaS products and have been for a number of years, just sort of walk us through the product scope and the evolution and how that is increasing.
Yeah, absolutely. So the company was founded by Minna and Tony, who are both software engineers, back in 2017. Getting the numbers wrong. 2017, 2018. I wasn't there when the company was founded, but it was really interesting. Tony and Minna really wanted to sort of develop a business in a space that helps with a fundamental human need, right? So they picked housing. So before they even started writing a single line of code, Minna actually got a job at a property management company and the front office as a leasing agent, just to kind of understand the problem sets, right? What was the bulk of the work? What could be automated? Where were the inefficiencies and the problems, right? So she realized that it was just a lot of messages back and forth. It was through email, through voice, through text, through phone calls, back and forth with residents, with prospects. And that was 80-90% of her day, essentially. So at that time, right, they had the idea of leveraging AI and LLMs to start to automate some of this. Right now, I think the trajectory of the company, if you were to map it out, it was sort of flat until I think in 2020, 21, 22, where the company really started to hit that hockey stick curve. I think there's a few things. One, the technology could really do a lot more, right? It could actually respond to messages in a way more sort of human-like way. I think through text messages and through emails, it's pretty much impossible now to be able to detect that it is AI. I think with voice and phone calls, there's still a little bit more latency, but I think overall it's like a really, really positive experience. And we're able to automate about 80% of all these phone call, messages, right? Only about 20% handoffs to a real human. And then as sort of the company progressed, we realized in addition to just the leasing function, right, which is booking a tour, scheduling a tour, and doing the sort of the upfront leasing process with prospects, we realized there was market pull to kind of help us to leverage our technology to lean into the delinquency side of things, right? If you think about people not paying rent, how can we use natural language to induce people to do that? How do we now deal with maintenance problems, right? If you're a resident living in a property, you have maintenance problems, you can submit a ticket, and we can now use AI to actually to triage that, to de-escalate that, or escalate that as needed, right? So there's a lot more workflows. We can now be using the models to do that. And the last thing I'll say is that post-2022, with the proliferation and sort of ubiquitousness of the consumer products like ChatGPT, I think what we realized is that our ICP and the people who are trying to sell to, they're a lot more willing to engage with our product because their children, for example, are using these products on a day-to-day basis, right? So we're now invited into the rooms to talk about this, and I think there's a lot. The the ease of sales has increased significantly.
And you had previously talked about the retention problem for leasing agents. And is it fair to say that the retention problem, which is typically a people problem, that's just solved by displacing the need for those people altogether?
I think we would look at it two ways. I think one is, yes, the displacement. I think there's a lot of value in that, right? Again, that's just the biggest dollar signs are in the people and the cost there. So if you really want to maximize your ROI, displacement is one avenue. The other avenue is just leveraging the people on site to do what they're actually good at, right? So if you go to a leasing agent's office right now, they're mostly sitting behind a computer desk, behind their computers, typing, responding to emails, taking phone calls, right? You can actually just do that either centrally at HQ somewhere, that's probably more cost effective, or just let AI do it. You can still have the people and human there, but you should those people should probably be greeting people, right? Or taking them on tours, or doing things that are a bit more value add, that adding that human interaction, rather than being at the office sort of responding to emails.
Mitch, back to accounting. Walk us, or like paint the picture for what an accounting firm looks like that's live on Basis. How are they using the platform? How are they using the product? How are customers of the accounting firm experiencing this change?
Yeah, it's a good question. So maybe just with the second part, customers probably don't experience the change. So most customers of accounting firms have no idea that people use Basis. Think of it as like an internal software that an accounting firm is using. How it looks very tactically differs a little bit depending on the part of the accounting firm. So things look different if you're doing outsourced accounting work versus if you're doing like audit work and whatnot. But generally, the theme is maybe similar to what you would see in engineering that we see today internally, right, and maybe other companies see, which is that you now have agents being able to go and take the first pass of certain work, right? So you have some understanding of, hey, here is the different work that I need to do. And depending on what type of accounting you are doing, what part of the firm you're in, that those lists of work might look different. And then you actually can have agents go and take the first pass of it, right? And I think the key to being successful here is making sure that you give the agents the actual ability to be successful. Have you connected them to the infrastructure that they need access to? Have you given them the right information? Have you onboarded them properly? Things along those lines. And then you could actually go and have them do work. And just like you would with somebody you actually hired, you give them feedback over time, you see how they're doing, and then as they get better and better, and you come to trust them more, you're able to give them more responsibility, right? Or give them more autonomy. You say, hey, now actually I don't need to approve this thing. You can just do it, right? Just like you would with someone new that you hired. So it tends to, the exact experience I think evolves as people build trust with using Basis. And I think it's something that you see actually, I don't think it is unique to accounting actually. I think it is a similar paradigm that you're seeing across knowledge work broadly. And that's how they're experiencing it.
So the accounting firms that are using Basis, are they hiring less? Are they taking on more customers that they would have previously said no to? I would imagine different accounting firms have a different level of tolerance in terms of to what degree they allow their own agents to interact with clients. Just walk us through how that looks across your customer set.
Yeah, I would say today it is very much in the I need to increase capacity for the ability to take on additional business, right? And that could be everything from I need to retain my best people, so I don't want to overwork them, to I literally need to. I mean, it's funny, early on, the amount of firms we spoke to who were flat out rejecting business was crazy, right? And so one of the things we talk a lot about with firms is what does the future of the firm look like? We have this whole deployed intelligence team, and I think one of the things we try to do is help people understand, and some firms, maybe are a little bit more progressive about it than others, about not just thinking, oh yes, this lets me take on a new, some new clients, but maybe, oh, if this is the new fundamental unit economics, maybe I can start to enter new businesses, right? Maybe there are businesses before that the unit economics didn't make sense for the texture of my firm that now I can actually start to do, right? Like how many people do you put onto an engagement? How do you think about tracking all that? Like what do you actually care about? Things along those lines. I think there's a lot of evolution there. I don't think at this point that there are firms that are thinking of it as, oh, great, I'm now way more productive, therefore let me, fire people. Right. That isn't, because the demand for accounting is just so massive. So at least right now, we haven't seen that in terms of how people are kind of using it.
you mentioned deployed intelligence. I'm going to park that for now and come back to it later. But on the topic of product, Max, I think you had a few visuals you wanted to walk everyone through as well. And as you set that up, just leaving you with the question around what a product actually looks like that eliminates a broker, that augments a CFO or a GC with additional capacity or additional time and resources.
Yeah, I think it's important to bring to life the scope of work when you're trying to build an AI native operating system. You need to own your own data model. So you can't rely on any third-party software system when delivering the outcome yourself, because then you can't automate the work, improve it over time, understand the nuances, how to add the human into the loop. So an example I kind of wanted to show was a fewfold. One, this is an example of how we essentially ingest policy documents. So these are 100-page policy PDFs that we need to source for every single business. They're 50 to 100 pages. There's hundreds of limits and exclusions. And today, an insurance broker will essentially go to one or two carriers and source a few of these. They probably won't even read it. And then they will present it to a business saying, here you go. So today, what we're actually now doing, and you saw we ingested probably 50 different PDFs that were from as many carriers as we could go to. We actually embedded all the data into our own system. And then what that enables us to do is once it's actually in our actual internal agent management system or our operating system, we can then present that information dynamically however we want. So this is that was our policy AI intake agent, and this would be our AI policy comparison agent. So this is actually trained, you prompt it, you type in /policy comparison, you select the policies you want to compare, and now it's basically identified, okay, here are the 6 various options we have. Let's compare every single limit across 50 different fields for the human to deliver that service to the end client. This probably would take like 3 to 4 hours for a given business to go in and compare that many options against one another. And you can see it's calling out the differences between the options. It's going through the entire document. And I think that's, how by owning the work, we're now building that system to then deliver a different client experience. I think it's important to talk when you can talk about it, but how you actually conceptualize it. So I wanted to show a couple examples of like the policy data intake, the data comparison, why owning your own data model is so important if you're going to go down the path of delivering the outcome yourself.
So a lot of these artifacts of data exist as PDFs, I would imagine, as correspondence over email perhaps as well. Once the intake happens, tell us a little bit more about how the agents sort of embed themselves or entrench themselves into everyday workflows. Okay, you've sold a new policy. What happens after that?
Yeah, I think where's the point where you want to intercept the most action and where's there the most time? So I think you talked about, which I love the story of how the company was created. Like literally was like the leasing agent trying to figure out how to do all the workflows. Like I became a licensed insurance broker, like tried to understand how to do all the workflows myself. So I think that's super important, having empathy for accounting firms and like understanding how you actually want to work with them. If you aren't deeply embedded first off, like within your own industry and you don't get on stage and you're like, I love accounting, I think you're going to fail. So I think like that's the ethos that you need to have if you're going to go into an industry. I love disrupting insurance, personally. I don't know if I'd love like traditional insurance, but to answer your question specifically, for our industry, like the API is the email inbox. And that's a very important insight, is like how do you take documents without interrupting an industry that's like 100 years old, right? These carriers, you have a business, you have a broker, and then you have insurance carriers. So you want to offer the best experience to the business, but you can't tell carriers that are 100 years old, change everything you're going to do, because they don't want to do that. So the important part is for our industry, the email inbox is where we automate all the work from. If an email comes in, we automatically we take out the policies, we read them, we put them into our system, we compare them against one another. So that's, I think, the like command center for where the agents essentially get to work in our company.
Talking about agents, this reminded me, Mitch, you announced the fact that Basis completed a business tax return end-to-end, entirely run by agents recently. Walk us through that. What were the inputs that made that possible? Has anything materially changed in capabilities that's made that possible? Or even, what have you guys been doing for the last, call it 3 years, to prepare yourselves to capture the moment when it was ready?
Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, you have to have certain bets about how technology is going to develop. So we from the very beginning have been very focused on believing that intelligence will continue to increase, like at a per kind of unit level. And so I think the key is you need to, around the intelligence, build all of the ontologies, the eval systems, the like understanding, the iteration loops, like all the different things that allows you to like update an intelligence, go from a GPT 4.0 to a like 5.4 or equivalent type model, and actually put that improved intelligence to use. I would say generally the things that are stopping the models from doing more and more complex things, like over time, they are less and less intelligence. What more intelligence lets you do, and this is a little bit in the weeds, but is it allows an agent to self-regulate its own state, right? Because an agent, unlike humans, is not good at just remembering and sort of keeping state over time, right? If we have conversations, you're going to remember this talk, probably an hour from now. You may not remember it a month from now. You almost certainly will not remember, obviously every little thing in the talk a year from now, because our brains are really good at like deciding, hey, like what's relevant, when should I remember it, how to think about it, et cetera. Agents don't have any of that. And so you have to, agents' raw intelligence is really useful for allowing them to regulate the state that they are in and the system to decide, hey, what is relevant for me to remember, what is relevant for this task, what is relevant for this task, et cetera. And as they get smarter, they get better at that. So for something like a 1065, that is something where you are doing enormous amounts of work, right, depending on the nature of it. It might take a human 30 hours. And so in order for an agent to do that end to end, it needs to have do a good job of sort of regulating its own environment and organizing things so that it is, when it's using one part of one work paper in its workbook, it is like leveraging the rules and understandings and information from something it did like an hour ago in the right way. And that takes intelligence. So in that sense, what has changed, the intelligence has gotten better. But what allows us to do that is all of the systems that we've built around the intelligence, all of the evals, all of the kind of ability to like extract signal, and all of the work needed to make sure that it actually can do things really well at production scale in a reliable fashion.
I want to park that thought because I want to get back to it when we talk about how you set up your team internally to make this possible. But just want to switch gears a little bit away from the product surface area being quote unquote AI pilled, and now move inwards and talk about the teams and the organizational structure of what you're building to make a lot of this possible. And so I would imagine for a number of the vertical SaaS companies in the audience who are actively thinking about some of the stuff that Mitch just said, or some of the stuff that you said, Ian or Max, around being vertical AI ready and transitioning into a vertical AI product and org, they're probably thinking about where to start. I go to you, Ian, because Elise made that transition over the last 7 to 8 years. So what changed internally to facilitate that, be it the systems, the nature of the organization, how it's structured, what teams are responsible for? How are you thinking about the next couple of years as well?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it actually starts with the mindset of what we're trying to build and what you're trying to accomplish. So our North Star is to help our customers automate work, right? So when you think about traditional SaaS, I think it's about giving our customers tools to do the work that they were already doing, but a lot better, a lot faster. But I think as you transition to vertical AI, it's actually about just delivering the service, right? Like the tool doesn't really even need to exist anymore, right? The AI should just be, through the agents, should just be actually doing the work. So that's how we kind of think about sort of our product roadmap, how we think about prioritizing what we do. So if you pick any vertical, you can sort of map out end to end what are all the different things and the workflows that need to get done for your customer's business to operate, right? And essentially, you can just sort of start picking at that, right? And how you build product, you can now zoom out sort of from a more first principles perspective. How do we get this thing done rather than how do we build a tool specifically for this workflow? It's actually kind of sort of a mindset shift. So as we think about sort of our roadmap, we think about, okay, what does it take to get to 100% automation, and then just work back from there, right? What are the lowest hanging fruit on the tree? Okay, this new feature, this new product would actually do X, right? And then this other thing would be doing Y, and that's how you kind of sort of plan out your journey. I think the second thing from a sort of team and organizational perspective is that you're fundamentally changing how your customers do work and operate. Like your customers' business models should probably change, and their operating model should change with you. I know that insurance, 100-year-old businesses, so probably a bit tougher, right? For housing, I mean, it's still like pretty old businesses as well. But so what we've actually done is set up teams, consulting teams. This is not just sort of AEs and customer success managers. This is actually, traditional management consultants, if you will, who are deployed into to work with our customers to help our customers C-suite think about how to think about AI strategy, think about their AI roadmap, think about how they can actually change their operating model and business model to adjust for this sort of world of AI, right? Like the question is like, do you believe that AI will participate in your industry or be a big part of it? And if it's yes, then you should probably proactively plan for that. And we actually have a team. We don't charge for it. We actually go into our customers and work with them, right? So I think so. Starting with the mindset, and then to sort of enabling, like you've got to sort of make that future world a reality rather than sort of let their industries change by themselves, because it's going to take a pretty long time.
Got it. Max, you mentioned you're happy to disrupt insurance, not necessarily thrilled by the fact that you work in insurance. How have you thought about building the internal operating system of the team, the systems to, one, sort of outcompete the incumbents in speed, but also just position yourselves as a net beneficiary of models getting more powerful underneath?
Yeah, I think the key question, the concept of the forward deployed engineer, is something at least when I think like 5 to 10 years into the future, and what's an enduring business, what's your moat, where are you going to be able to protect your company? If Anthropic decides to target a specific industry, deploy an entire forward deployed engineer team at that business and build all the custom workflows that business needs, does that destroy your company? And I think that's a really important thing that everyone's asking themselves on how much can I be embedded into all of the unique workflows for that specific industry, where not just like selling software or here's like the toolkit of software we're using, but like how can I actually deploy my team at that company site to ensure that it's being implemented across the entire organization. And that's a new way of selling software. And I think that's super interesting as thinking about what's your competition. So our version of like a forward deployed engineer is our engineer is on site next to our actual insurance advisor and an insurance attorney, shipping, reviewing, improving every single day nonstop. And that's our moat, is building that operating system and improving that every single day. And I think, I'm happy to dive into more, but that's kind of the simple view.
How did the economics of that scale over time, though?
Yeah, we're at a point where your average, overall, in terms of industry, like $500 billion industry, 94% average industry retention. We're at 99% industry retention. Contracts grow over time as businesses grow. Even on flat fees, you can increase over time. And your average advisor, right, if you can make them 3 to 5 times more efficient, where Marsh does like 20 billion in revenue at 5 billion of EBITDA, publicly traded. It's a great company to begin with. So I think the important part is like, how profitable is the industry you're going after today? And now if you make it that much more efficient and you can reach a level of scale that's meaningful, that's actually, I think, the biggest problem is like, how do you get to, if you're going to deliver the outcome yourself and the service, you need to get to a level of scale where obviously having engineers developing your own operating system, like the economics pay for itself. But since we started the company, when we closed our Series B, we basically hadn't spent a single dollar of our Series A, and we 3x'd our company. So I think that's like a fair answer of the realm of how can you make the economics work? You got to show it.
And so both of you actually talked about data ontology as well. And I would imagine your FDE teams on site is a big part of the collection process. But how do you, apart from just a high degree of proximity to the customers, how do you get very good at just ontology mapping, data collection? Are there generalized systems that you build to make that possible outside of just sending folks to customers?
Well, and then I'd love to hear your guys' answers on this. Our quick answer is we actually couldn't rely on a single system of software in the entire industry. So today, people operate on 6 different disconnected systems. We actually made the decision we need to own our entire data ontology from day one and build it up from scratch. And that, I think, was the biggest decision with our team, needing to know how to do that and how to do it at scale as we go to support 20, 30 different industries and how to make that happen. So that'd be the way we think about it.
Got it. Mitch, I want to pick up from where we left off on the previous thread around systems you've built, evals you've built internally. Tell us about how you've set up the team. At least between us, we've talked about the Atlas team that you've built, the deployed intelligence team that you've built, agent management teams that you've built, but maybe just elaborate for the rest of the audience.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's sort of like we were talking earlier. I think that putting people, so the deployed intelligence team is not FDEs. It's actually like accountants and operators, and to help go and work closely with firms and teach them the new ways to sort of literally deploy intelligence and how to think about things. So I think that's really important in terms of how you orient it. Part of the other thing that came out of that is we also have a team of accountants actually who's are effectively ML researchers in some sense, in which they are the ones that are crafting rubrics for judges, and they're the ones who are they're not like manually one by one looking at outputs. What they're doing is they are essentially training agents whose job it is to go and look at outputs, right? In order to take their taste and try to embed it into what good looks like. And part of that comes from their lived experiences, and then part of that comes from feedback we get from customers in terms of, hey, ways I want things to behave. And so I think that's really, really important. And I guess part of that entire thing is needing to make your company be extremely AI native, which is where Atlas comes in. So the thing I always tell people internally is, if you look at our ambitions and you look at where we're trying to go, the size of company from a human perspective that we would need to be by, call it, 2027 in order to do what we're trying to do would be, thousands of people. It's against the laws of physics for us to grow that fast. And so if we're going to be doing that kind of output, we can't rely on 2021 style, like hire 500 people tomorrow, don't think about where they go. You actually need to build systems internally that can compound. And so, for example, like one of our internal goals is 50% of all work at the company is being done by agents by end of year. And you don't just do that by handing everybody cowork, right? You do that by thinking really deeply about, hey, what is the canon in the company that is actually compounding? What's that canonical context? What are the systems that canonical context is used and maintained, deduped, ensured that it is not, being added in randomly from different things, and ensuring you have the right agents and systems around that to actually do real work across the company.
So outside of, or said differently, apart from the engineering team, just give us some examples of non-engineering teams at Basis using like AI or relying on 50% of their work being done by agents. Just give us some examples of workflows and everyday tasks.
Yeah, it could be everything from, there is a meeting that someone on the deployed intelligence team has with a client. Let's say you're doing like an exec review, right, on how things are going, and you need to make a deck for that. And what is the work you need to make the deck? Well, you need to know what is the standards of a good deck. You need to know what is the data you're going to use to go and add into the deck. You need to know, hey, what is the history of this client before? Like, what did we talk about last time? And you need to put all that together and get to a good deck. And at the end of the day, that is, agents can totally do that work, right? But they can only do that work if there's a very clear canonical source of truth of what does a good deck look like? What is the basis version of a good deck? Where can I find the data for this customer? What does not work previously? And so if you can model the context of your company, we talk about it as modeling it like a code base. And so if you model the context of your company in such a way that it is actually ergonomic for agents to operate in it, then now suddenly you can actually build skills or other types of instruction manuals for an agent to now go and actually make that deck before anybody even has to think about it. Yep. And now the person can just maybe do the last 15% of tweaking it before they have to go to the meeting.
And you mentioned the accountants on the deployed intelligence team sometimes double up as ML researchers. How do you hire for that? Or are you just hiring accountants and then you have the systems and structure and training in place to help them double up?
Yeah, now it's its own separate team now. It used to be kind of combined, but it's really hard. I think it requires a lot of systems thinking. I think maybe people who are not as good with customers, maybe more on the ML researcher path. And we now we do have kind of the trainings and sort of systems to help build people up into that. But definitely it's looking for people who have really good taste and ability and good clarity of thought in understanding, hey, here is what good looks like, and can I actually articulate that? Yeah. And in some sense, those are the skills that matter most when you're trying to work with agents regardless.
I want to switch to the current thing, and Max, you kind of touched on this with the model providers at least seemingly creeping up or scope creeping up into the application layer. You talked about proximity through the FDE team to your customers, to carriers, to brokers. Apart from proximity of the FDE team on the implementation and post-sales side, can you just help us characterize the primitives of with coverage in terms of what you guys are building and how those flywheels start to spin if, for say, Anthropic decided to build their own de novo brokerage one day?
Definitely. I think also I like the concept of how do you build a mental model of your entire company. That's a pretty simple way of thinking about how, so internally we actually measure how much for every single email written at the entire company is drafted with AI or is just written yourself. So across the entire company. That is the people delivering the service, that is our actual sales team, and we evaluate how we can get that to 90% plus over the next 6 months. So it's gone already from 0, maybe 8 months ago, to now over 60%, 70%. And that's actually like the semantic text that's kept in the email. So we're constantly measuring, just bringing, making things kind of like a very simple in an example, how much of this email was literally changed by a human, and then editing that for the next time and training, okay, well, in this stage of our funnel with this customer who says this is the better answer. So the iteration of that's automating our growth team. We've actually don't want them ever in HubSpot or ever in our CRM. We want all activity in our company to be automatically updated based on the context of a deal at a given point in time to make our sales team 2 to 3 times more effective. So based on the call transcript, based on the email context, based on where the customer came in, email should be drafted, stages should be updated, attribution should be allocated. I think that's an example. I don't know if that answers like us versus Anthropic per se, but I think that's a way where the data moat layer in that example is applied in our growth team, but that same philosophy is applied on the actual insurance team delivering the service. So the same measurement, the same concept of how do you iterate and improve every single interaction is, I think, where you can build a strong moat.
Ian, I think if I were to ask the same question to you, I guess real estate, healthcare, hairy physical spaces, and going and deploying on site is probably a big part of that durability, defensibility. Curious, how do you guys do it? How are the teams set up? How do you measure success? Yeah,
absolutely. I think because you guys already touched on the data side of things, I'll sort of take a different focus. But the fundamental sort of moat that we think that we have and sort of the approach that we take is really going super, super deep into the vertical, right? And I think I've sort of talked about this a little bit, but it's about automating 100% of our customers' workflows, right? If I think about Anthropic and some of the bigger labs sort of coming into play, like as we reflect, will they be able to do what we do, right? We're trying to go really, really deep. We intersect with the physical world. So when you play around in the physical world, I think that's probably one of the final frontiers in terms of the larger labs, right? I'm not sure if folks agree or not, but I think about what we do. We do maintenance, we do touring. Touring has locks, touring has codes, has signs, right? It has all these physical elements in our customers' businesses, which actually kind of creates a little bit of defensibility for us. So even if a larger lab can do, let's say, 10, 20, 30, 40, 50% of what we do, I think customers at the end of the day just want their problem solved. They want, ideally, if possible, one provider to solve 100% of their problems, right? If the price is right, obviously. So as we think about that, we just need to be able to provide them end-to-end service, really, really high quality service, so that we can't get disrupted by a lab coming in doing like 20% of it, right? So that's how we think about it.
I know we're running up on time here, so I want to just open it up to the audience in case there are any questions or just thoughts that they wanted to run by the panelists.
Sorry. I can repeat. Are you on?
Yeah. I was just asking Max if you would be interested or think about this in the long term. Like, would we eventually try to roll up some of these brokerages once we've built out all the systematized knowledge and we've built out all of the automated workflows, and we could just use that as a way to accelerate the growth of the business?
It's honestly very important question that we've debated internally. The simplest way of eventually the opportunity's there. Can you do it? Is it worth the integration headache? Maybe. Now, the key question is like, how much does this cost to add this revenue through acquisition, or how much does this cost to acquire the revenue organically? If we can acquire the revenue faster and cheaper, and it's actually customers that we like, and we can avoid any integration costs, why not just go 10 times faster on organic growth? So that's the way we've thought about it super simply, is like, there's way too much to go invest in organically versus inorganically, but I do think that opportunities, it definitely should exist for people to do, and yeah, I do worry though if people go and do that first without understanding what they're getting into.
Yeah. Do you want to? Is it worth asking basis if they'll, if they'll acquire accounting firms too? Or?
We're not going to acquire accounting firms.
One more. Yeah, really brief question because I can tell the audience wants to get in. How do you balance new feature development versus evals to harden your existing workflows? Is it a 50-50? Is it 80-20? What would you say for that?
Is that for me? Is that for me?
Any one of them, or okay?
I think it depends how you define new feature development. I think if we think of new feature development as, hey, there's a new like modal that like does X, then like maybe low. I think if you think of new feature development as, hey, here is a new capability the agent has to go and perform something, then maybe you're closer to like, I guess 50-50, like 80-20. I think in some sense the idea of evals to harden behaviors is not entirely correct, because you like when you actually have agents that are doing massive amounts of work in the real world, like all of the work, how do I phrase this? Like the majority of the work they're doing in production is going to be out of sample from your evals by definition, right? Like you even if you have the resource of Google, you're not going to actually have evals for every single situation that actually happens in production. So you need to be really confident in taking your evals and extrapolating from them across the universe of situations that are going to exist in the real world. And so you want to continue like adding more dots onto your like map, your heat map of evals, so that you can have a more and more confidence in that, for sure. But you're also consistently changing what that map looks like, right? If you say add a new integration, or the models get smarter, or you can now do a longer running task, you're actually changing the map. So I wouldn't think of it as like so binary. That's kind of one and the same, in that you are extending the agent capabilities, and then at the same time you have to add evals that like test for that, but also how that it relates to all the other work that it's kind of doing. So definitely in that world, and less so on the, hey, we want to have more screens with buttons for people to click.
Yeah, sure. I can quickly add to that a little bit. At Elise, I think we truly take a sort of and I think that probably everybody will say this, but customer-centric sort of approach to this, right? I think when I joined a couple years ago, when I asked the founders, hey, what does our product roadmap look like, right? I think the standard answer they would probably give me is, we talk to the customers, right? And I think if I were to sort of draw a line, it's probably about 80-20, honestly. 80% sort of working on existing customers' problems, fixing the bugs and features there, and really letting the market pull us, right? Finding the nuances. I don't think if I rewind a year ago, we probably wouldn't put pen to anything that a customer did not explicitly ask for. I think that's sort of been sort of the way we sort of develop our roadmap, and to date, it's been working pretty well for us.
One more.
Thanks. What's been your playbook? I mean, anybody can answer, for just generally winning over the trust of your customers to just hand over the reins to these AI tools, especially in these stodgy industries like accounting, where it's like, can I really trust this thing?
Yeah, it's a great question. I have a lot of thoughts on this. I'll be really short. To me, the most important thing is that you cannot go to people and say, here is a workflow that will work 100% of the time because we're really great at our job. The reason you can't do that is because one saying I have is that humans are really used to working with non-deterministic systems. It's just those systems are normally their coworkers, not their computers. Right? If I have a function, that function is going to be right 100% of the time. Someone might have wrote the function wrong, but the function itself is never at fault. Right? You don't check if the button worked or not. If it's not working, it's a broken button. If it doesn't work 1 out of 10 times. If a human you hired made a mistake 1 out of 20 times, it's pretty good, right? And even the smartest accountant in the world will at some point make a mistake, which is why in accounting, just like in lots of knowledge work, so much of the work is actually checking other people's work. That's why you have like pull request reviews in engineering. That's why you do reconciliations. That's why you do quality control. Like, that's why you do all these different things. That is a feature of working with non-deterministic systems. And so the fact that an agent can be wrong is a feature. It's not a bug. And so I think what the key is really important is, yes, we do a lot of work to make sure the agents are super accurate. Sure. But there's a different part of it, which is changing people's paradigm to understand that they're now actually working with intelligence. If they work with intelligence and expect the determinism and accuracy of software, they're inevitably going to be disappointed, right? And they would never have that expectation of a human. And so it's important both from a UX perspective, from a messaging perspective, to make people understand that, hey, think of this a little bit like you have someone who's working for you, right? And what do? You build up trust, right? First, you give them a small kind of task. Then you give them a bigger task and a bigger task. You don't like day one say, hey, 25-year-old accountant who just came out of their master's program, you're about to do a full end-to-end analysis and email it to the client tomorrow, and I will never look at anything. Of course not, right? And everyone understands that intuitively when it's a person, but it's maybe not as obvious when now you're talking to a computer. And so I think the key is how do you build the softwares and the messaging so people do understand that. And I think that's actually much more important than the accuracy. The accuracy matters, but you'll never be at 100%. And so if you promise that, it'll be a bad time anyway.
Yeah, I think the change in framework is you've gone from a situation of 100% certainty in work to be done with minimal leverage to now an age of maximum leverage with not 100% certainty, right, on what the outcome's going to be. And if you can, in your sales process, educate the client on that new mental shift and understand this is now a layer of intelligence you're going to work with, here's the amount of work we now can get done, 5 times the amount of work, but it's not going to be with 100% certainty. That's an important expectation to set. And then I think just like speed to value when you're going after these old industries, like if you can prove very quickly in a cycle, here's how much value I can deliver you with this much lift on your end to show you how magical this is, you can capture attention to say, like fundamentally, are you worth my time or are you not worth my time? That's what every single person kind of I think about to get on a call, to go through a sales process. And so, maximizing value as fast as possible, as early in the sales cycle is super, super important.
I know we're pretty much running out of time, but just want to piggyback on what Max said, just to kind of give a super tangible example of pretty much exactly how he framed it, which is, and I think this is pretty easily understandable. So if you think about a leasing agent, right, a leasing office, we might not be able to get all the phone calls right 100% of the time, but 50% of the time, nobody's answering the phone calls, right? So you can just, sit with the CEO of the property management company, try to phone a property, and they're just going to keep on ringing, the phone's going to keep on ringing, and nobody's going to pick it up, right? So at least we can pick up the phone 100% of the times, 24/7, right? So it's just like the ROI, right? Is that more valuable than getting it maybe like 5% wrong? And I think most people will decide, will make the right decision there.